Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello, welcome to the Library of Congress, everyone. Nice to see you at noon on a Thursday. My name is Rob Casper. I'm the head of the Poetry and Literature Center here at the library, and I'm honored to present the first of our programs associated with the library's exhibit, Echoes of the Great War, American Experience of World War I. I'm going to see, before I go any farther, I want to just check something on the sound. Checking. How does it sound back there? Can you hear me okay? All right. This exhibition in the Southwest Gallery of the second floor of the library's historic Thomas Jefferson building across the street examines the upheaval of World War as Americans confronted it, both at home and abroad. It considers the debates and struggles that surrounded U.S. engagement, explores U.S. military and home front mobilization and the immensity of industrialized warfare, and touches on the war's effects as an international peace settlement was negotiated, national borders were redrawn, and soldiers returned to reintegrate into American society, a theme that Yusuf will talk about a little bit later in his presentation. Today's event is presented in conjunction with the library's Veterans Day programming. This programming is part of the Library of Congress Veterans History Project's programming efforts that began on November 7th and will continue on to November 11th. Congress created the Veterans History Project in 2000 to collect, preserve, and make accessible the firsthand remembrances of America's war veterans from World War I through the most recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, so that future generations may hear directly from veterans and better understand the realities of war. To find out more about the library's Veterans Day program and its World War I exhibit, you can visit our website, www.loc.gov/, actually, just go there. If you want to see our literary programming, you can go to www.loc.gov/poetry. We also have a sign-up sheet in the foyer if you want to join our events listserv and get more information about future literary programming. Before I tell you more about this event, let me ask you to turn off your cell phones and any other electronic devices you have that might interfere with the program. Also, I'd like to let you know that this program is being recorded for webcast, and your participation gives us permission to broadcast this event. So just so you know. The focus of the Poetry and Literature Center's World War I programming is to link the literature of the Great War to the poems and stories of today's American poets and writers. For our kickoff event, we have asked one of our greatest poets to set the stage for this series. You can read more about Yusuf Komunyakaa in your print program, which should be on your chairs, and you can see his many honors, including a Bronze Star for his, which he received as managing editor of the Southern Cross newspaper during the Vietnam War. I first encountered Yusuf's work over a quarter century ago when a professor assigned Denke Dao in our creative writing workshop. And I'm excited to say that Denke Dao is for sale in the back. I will never forget the experience of reading this book, of seeing war through the beautiful and violent lyricism of We Never Know, and of encountering the Vietnam Wall first through Facing It, one of the most powerful poems of our time. I will always be grateful to Yusuf for what he taught me in that book, and I'm thankful he is here for us today to remind us what poems can do to contend with man's most tragic engagements. Please join me in welcoming Yusuf Komunyakaa.
It's a great honor to be here. I would like to say up front that I'm not a historian, but I'm a poet who loves history. I'm going to start by reading some poems from the Great War. The first poem is entitled On Being Asked to Write a War Poem by W.B. Yeats. I think it better that in times like these, a poet's mouth be silent. For in truth, we have no gift to set a statesman right. He has had enough of meddling. Who can please a young girl in the indolence of her youth, or an old man upon a winter's night? I suppose, in a certain sense, Yeats' poem is a warning, but I'm going to just proceed to a poem entitled The Death of a Soldier by Wallace Stevens. Normally, we don't associate Stevens with World War I. Life, contracts, and death is expected as a season of autumn. The soldier falls. He does not become a 3 days personage, imposing his separation, calling for plump. Death is absolute and without memorial, as in a season of autumn when the wind stops. When the wind stops and over the heavens the clouds go, nevertheless in their direction. When I think about World War I and the poetry to rise out of that conflict, that war, that bloody war, trench warfare, I think of Sassoon. And there's a poem of his that's rather taxing, and it's called They. I like the fact that it's called They and not me. The bishop tells us when the boys come back, they will not be the same, for they have fought in a just cause. They lead the last attack on Antichrist. Their comrades' blood has brought new right, the greed and honorable race. They have challenged death and dared him face to face. We're none of us the same, the boys reply. For George lost both legs and Bill's stone blind. Poor Jim's shot through the lungs and like to die. And Bert's gone syphilitic, you are not find a chap who served that hasn't found some change. And the bishop said, the ways of God are strange. Yes. E. Cummins. I have to admit that E. Cummins was one of the first poets I engaged with, and I never really associated him with World War I, but here he is. And a strange poem of his called Etc. My sweet old etc. Aunt Lucy during the recent war could, and what is more, did tell you just what everybody was fighting for. My sister, Isabel, created hundreds and hundreds of socks, not to mention shirts, flea-proof, ear warmers, etc., wasters, etc. My mother hoped that I would die, etc. Bravely, of course, my father used to become hoarse, talking about how it was a privilege, and if only he could. Meanwhile, my self, etc., lay quietly in the deep mud, etc., dreaming, etc., of your smile, eyes, knees, and your etc. Talking about insinuation, right? What gets said and what doesn't get said, I suppose. I think he's having fun, really. The Send-Off by Whifford Earn. That's another name that really moves to the forefront always when we think about the poetry of World War I. The Send-Off. Down the closed, darkening lanes, they sang their way to the siding shed and lined the train with faces grimly gay. Their breasts were struck all white with wreath and spray, as men's are dead. Dull porters watched them, and a casual tramp stood staring hard, sorry to miss them from the upland camp. Then, unmoved, singles nodded, and a lamp winked to the guard. So secretly, like roans hushed up, they went. They were not ours. We never heard to which front they were sent, nor where, if they yet mark what women sent, who gave them flowers. Shall they return to beating of great bells and wild train loads, a few, too few for drums and yells, may creep back, silent, to village wells, up half-known roads. And I'm just going to read two more poems. Well, one more poem associated with World War I. And this is slightly different for the simple reason because we get to hear a woman's voice. And that's very important because there were 947,000 women who work in the munition plants, and 300 died from TNT poison or explosions. That's important to know. Women at munition making. This is by Mary Collins. Their hands should minister unto the flame of life. Their fingers guard the rosy tip, swelling with milk to the eager mouth of the suckling babe, or smooth with tenderness, softly and soothingly, the heated brow of the ailing child, or stray among the curls of the boy or girl, thrilling to mother love. But now their hands, their fingers are coursing in munition factories. Their thoughts, which should fly like bees among the sweetest mind flowers, gaining nourishment for the thoughts to be, are bruised against the law. Kill, kill. They must take part in defacing and destroying the natural body, which certainly during this procession in the shrine of the Spirit, O God. Throughout the ages, we have seen again and again men by thee create canceling each other, and we have marveled at the seeming annihilation of thy work. But this goes further. The fountainhead mounts like a poison to the Creator's every heart on earth. The question at the end of the poem is really, I think, a moment of protest. And I'm thinking about other moments of protest. I'm particularly thinking of an individual by the name of Charles Young. He had been at he had wanted to be, he was a full colonel, and he wanted to be part of the war effort. But he was retired as a full colonel for the simple reason because he was black. Now, He goes to prove that he is agile, that he's physical fit, because he rides 500 miles from Wilberforce, Ohio, to D.C. by horse. Charles Young comes up again when we think of San Juan Hill, because at Wilberforce, he had been instrumental in training troops that ended up at San Juan Hill rescuing the Rough Riders. That was in 1898. What is the situation of the black man in World War I? For me, it's also personal, but I'm going to play this little clip here from a lyric that I wrote a few years ago. And this is about the 369th. Okay, the reason I wrote the lyric had to do with having some history in my psyche that I was wrestling with. First of all, the Hill Fighters of Harlem, the 369th, fought under the French flag. Black Americans fought under. Reflect, it seems as if I'm transposed, standing in the atmosphere of a memory, a feeling, a place. I can see the room. I can hear a voice. Usually, I'm listening acutely. In this memory, time is sequential. I am standing in the living room with my great uncle, where my great uncle is asleep. And I hear him sob and cry. This is not the first time I hear him this way. But in this memory, I am 6 or 7, and only the way a child can, I ask, "What you crying about, Uncle Jesse?" He rises, sits on the edge of the couch, takes my hand and says, "I was on a death detail overseas. Soldiers were dropping like flies. We cut trenches in the ice. I learned what dog tags are good for. I put one into the mouth of each dead soldier, and the other dog tag in a canvas bag, and we push the dead into ditches till we come back to dig them up." Then he rolls a cigarette from his red can of Prince Abbott. My great uncle Jesse was a veteran of World War I. He fought under the French flag because at the time the U.S. military was segregated. This image of him digging up corpses from the trenches recurred in my psyche. It had already begun to direct my childhood play where one fights imaginary wars. But perhaps this knowing also created a real sense of reflection. At only 6 or 7, I wasn't eager to pretend to be dead. I suppose I'm going to take a slight turn. I'm going to read a poem that's 1 year after the war. It's written in 1919. And you may know this poem, "If We Must Die," by Claude McKay. If we must die, let it not be making their mock at our accused lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe, though far outnumbered. Let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Let, like men, we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying but fighting back. It's an interesting poem because if we think about what happens after many of the soldiers return, the war ends in 1918. This is also a moment of great conflict in America, especially if we look at the history of lynching. And that is what essentially Claude McKay is responding to. A lot of the individuals who are lynched are actually vets. And the other thing about the poem, If We Must Die, Churchill, World War II, reads the poem to the English people, to Britain. He doesn't say anything about Claude McKay writing it, but it's an interesting moment because the poem, I'm going to read from a section called, it's a strange title, Love and a Daydream of Odysseus' Bed. But to shoot an arrow through the bullseye, a 12 axis lined up in a row, is to sleep with one's eyes open. Yes, of course, there stands lovely Penelope, like a trophy, still holding the brass key against her breast. How did the even star fall into that room, lost between plot and loot? The plucked strain turns into a lyre, in praises and curses to the unborn. Okay. I want to say, okay, here we are. When our hands caress bullets and grenades, or linger on the turrets and luminous wings of reconnaissance planes, we leave glimpses of ourselves on the polished hardness. We surrender skinned hair, sweat, and fingerprints. The assembly lines hum to our touch, and the grinding wheels record our laments and laughter into the bright metal. I touch your face, your breast, a flower holding a world in focus. We give ourselves to each other, letting the workday slide away. Afterwards, lying there, facing the sky, I touch the crescent-shaped war wound. Yes, the oldest prayer is still in my fingertips. Someone's beating a prisoner. Someone's counting red leaves falling outside a clouded window in the secret country. Someone holds back a river, but the next rabbit jab makes him piss on the stone floor. The interrogator orders the man to dig his grave with a teaspoon. The one he loves, her name he loves, on his tongue, to revive it, to take his mind off the electorate were. He almost said, there's a parrot in a blue house that knows the password, a woman's name. I said I wouldn't write about Vietnam anymore, and I found myself thinking about the 14, 15 young black men who threw themselves on grenades in Vietnam. And I'm still trying to make some sense out of that. Where does it come from? It's not rehearsed. It's not practiced. Maybe you can help me. But I'm going to read this poem called Grenade. There's no rehearsal to turn flesh into dust so quickly. A hair trigger, a cock hammer in the brain, a split second between man and infamy. It lands on the ground. A few soldiers duck, and the others are caught in a half run, and one throws himself down on the grenade. All the watches stop, the flash, smoke, silence. Flesh and earth fall into the eyes and mouths of the men. A dream trapped in midair. They touch their legs and arms, their groins, ears and noses saying, what happened? Some are crying, others are laughing.